Hi, I'm Larry with Hello MD. We're here in Larkspur, California, just outside San Francisco at the Cannabis Society's one-on-one executive conference. And I'm here with Sheldon from Muncheez. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us and a couple minutes with us here online.
Sure.
Why don't we start with why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and what Muncheez does?
Sure. Yeah. So Muncheez is a consumer app for consumers to discover and find cannabis legally. As you know, there's both kind of an illicit market and a legal market. We have taken a stance that we are only supporting the legal market. Okay. You can download Muncheez on any app store. You can go to muncheez.com. Spelled a little differently, Muncheez.
Got it.
And we basically have created a solution for both brands and retailers to advertise programmatically in the mainstream media. And we've allowed for consumers to discover these brands and feel secure in either consuming these brands or learning about these brands. And we've been around for about 2 years. We've been in stealth mode, coding. Okay. We've raised some venture capital money so far. We're raising some more money. That's why we're here today. The business is really doing well right now. We work with some really great brands now, like Kiva. We work with Rove. We work with Bang Chocolates.
California.
Yeah, California.
Focused.
Well, we are now branching into MSO operators, so we can run nationally. Muncheez is a national app, and our programmatic reach is national.
Okay.
So we can go across any state, whether that's medical or recreational.
Let me stop and ask you one question. Mm-hmm. Programmatic is a word that's thrown around all the time in advertising, but for those of us who aren't really in it, sometimes we pretend to know what it means.
Sure.
But in under 60 seconds, can you tell me what programmatic means from an advertising perspective?
Absolutely. I will distill it down. It's delivering the right ad to the right person at the right time, whether it's state-gated or age-gated or demographic targeted. So it's not a mass-produced ad that just kind of is blasted out and without any sort of intelligence behind it. They're very intelligently created ads that are then served intelligently.
And so how do you make sure, for instance, that a 17-year-old doesn't see the ad from Kiva?
So the publishers that we work with are collecting data on consumers, and we use third-party data sets and first-party data sets that allow us to do age gating, plus every ad that you then click on and you land on a particular brand has age gating requirements. So you have to confirm, double opt-in that you're 21 or over.
Okay. And in terms of, I just lost my train of thought. You're working mostly with brands and with retailers, mostly in California. And what are the results like for those brands?
Yeah, we're doing great. So we reach over 200 million consumers a month now, and that's growing. Okay. In California, is about 20% of our traffic. Okay. We actually are driving orders and sales for brands on a daily basis, and we are working with some of the biggest brands that operate in the edible space, the flower space, and the concentrate space. Okay. And we're in right now some of the big brands that we have in, like Colorado, for example, is Next One Labs, one of the largest concentrate companies in the space, uses our technology.
And I regained my thought.
Yes.
And it was about publishers. Yes. And it also comes back to just understanding what's happening specifically in the advertising space for cannabis. Because it's so different from state to state. Since legalization, what's the trajectory right now? Are more and more publishers, coming online? And I say that because I spent a lot of time in Canada, and even though it's legal adult, it's legal medical, there are all sorts of publishers who still will not touch it.
So it's regulated by state, and it's also regulated by licensing elements. So as you know, brands are licensed by their own state of operations. Publishers have state-by-state targeting capabilities. Not all publishers work with cannabis companies. There's a handful that do. Some big companies like Vice Media, of course.
But the ones that don't.
The ones that don't.
Is that a cultural decision? Is that a licensing decision? Is it a federal decision?
I think it's a combination of all. Yeah. Plus, it's publicly traded companies.
Okay.
If you take a look at most of those large publishers, a lot of them are actually publicly traded.
Okay, and so you don't expect them, until the feds do something that is meaningful, you don't expect them to come in and,
I expect them to
be supply for you?
Yeah, I expect them to migrate as federal becomes more top
But
line.
it sounds like there's plenty else to choose from for the
There
moment.
plenty are.
And I think maybe that's the misconception,
Yes,
is what I
yes.
was getting at. Okay, last question. Everywhere I go, people are talking about the black market. I think you raised it here earlier today with the group. In Canada, they're talking about the black market. Wherever there's legal now, it's almost suddenly like we should talk about the black market. We didn't talk about it before. We went to legalization telling people that this is why we were legalizing, because we could get rid of the black market. And yet in every market, it seems like it's actually growing. So are there publishers, are there networks, are there people on the ad side, supply side, that are taking money from black market and making what we're all trying to do that much harder?
I think there are some endemic sites that do take money from black markets.
Yeah.
But I think your non-endemic, your broader-based publishers are not taking money
And
from the black market.
how does that stop?
I think they need to be educated.
Do they have to run out of money, the black market, or
No, I think the publishers need to be educated. I think they need to understand exactly the impact that they're creating, and the confusion they're creating in the market.
do you think some of them don't even know that they're?
I do.
In the same way that consumers don't
Yeah, in
even know
fact,
that they're buying black market.
Yeah, there's very limited law and very limited recommendations written about kind of guidelines around compliance advertising. We, in partnership with one of the governing groups called the Interactive Advertising Bureau, we are actually writing some of the guidelines and the recommendations of how advertising should be done in a digital fashion.
Yeah.
I think once that becomes readily available, people will start making better decisions.
Let's hope.
Let's hope.
Sheldon,
Yes.
great to have you
Yeah,
here for the
great,
day.
thank you.
Great to have you here in studio. We're here with Sheldon from Muncheez at the Cannabis Society Exec One-on-One meeting here at Hello MD in Larkspur, California. Stay tuned for our next guest.
In one.
Hi, we're back here in Larkspur, California, just outside San Francisco at Hello MD, the venue host to the Cannabis Society one-on-one exec conference, and I'm here with David Hua of Meadow. It's so good
Hello.
to see you, and so good to have you in our offices.
Yeah, really good to see you. It's been what, probably
It's
2 years.
been a couple of years. It's always nice to be with someone who's been here since before mainstream, so it's very good to see you. Since it's been a couple years, let's take a minute first and just tell us what Meadow is up to.
Yeah, so Meadow is really primarily working on providing software for dispensaries. You know, when we first started, we were more serving the delivery market. Now we're in retail and delivery. And I think at the current moment, we're helping navigate a lot of these operators through metric. As states' track and trace system has come online, and we're shifting from temporary licenses to provisional. And so we work with about 120 plus dispensaries across the state, really powering their software.
And so as a consumer, or the consumers with us today, will they ever see Meadow, or that's behind the scenes making things work?
Yeah, I mean, they see Meadow at every point of sale. Mm-hmm. So whether you're going to the store, you're checking in, you're placing an order with a bud tender, or you're going online and visiting a dispensary's menu to place an order in advance, or a receipt that gets printed, for what's going on. The back end is usually served by the staff and the dispensary owners and the bud tenders. Okay. But anywhere you can purchase cannabis legally, Meadow is there to help power it.
And so Meadow just makes life easy for me as a consumer. I know that it's compliant. I know what inventory is available at my store, et cetera, and you're doing all that hard stuff in the back end.
Yeah, and I think that the power is that Meadow makes the lives easier for the dispensary owners.
Yeah.
And so it's saving them a ton of time, which then gives them the time to serve their consumers.
And you're just operating in California
Yes,
today, right?
Yes, yeah.
And
seems large enough for us.
And your team's in San Francisco.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, hearing everybody coming from all over the world today, I'm like, well, my commute was 35 minutes.
That's a good thing. But actually, let's use that as a segue, California seems big enough, and it is, and it should be.
Fifth largest economy in the world.
For most segments, this would be fine.
Yes,
the cannabis world right now is just, I think, in the last 12 months, gone global.
Yeah.
I have the pleasure of traveling to a lot of countries and see what people are doing. Everyone's at a different stage. And what's interesting to me when I'm going around the world is the U.S. is not yet regarded, most early industries, everyone's looking to California or to the industry or to the U.S. as a whole. What are we doing? And we'll just follow. Everybody else is actually using the opportunity to get a little bit ahead while we work out our issues. So, I mean,
a lot of issues.
How does California end up playing the role it normally does for the rest of the world of from an innovation standpoint and influencing the global market under the restraints that it's currently
I mean,
within?
I think to me, California is one of the oldest markets, with medical going back to 96.
Yeah.
And I think in this transition to the adult use side, there's a lot of differences in how the supply chain works. There's a lot of differences in the regulations from a state and local level. But the expertise, the know-how, the genetics, the culture of it is here. It's strong. And although
it seems unexportable almost at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. California is a darling in the entire globe, not just for cannabis.
Yeah.
And I think to take a step back, it's about thinking about California long game. And sure, we're having our short-term aberrations right now with this transition. How could it have gone smoothly with so many things at odds with each other and being a heavily regulated state? But that being said,
from a market that was used to functioning in a certain way for a very long time.
Super efficient, right? From grower to dispensary, but now you have distribution, manufacturing. But what we're going for is that consistency of product and consistency, the strength of genetics. I mean, it's all here. And so I think it's just a matter of time before we work out the laws at a local and state level, before we have a few cycles of putting new bills in place that help smooth out the industry. And so operators can move more efficiently.
Well, what's interesting is that the world, and we've got a lot of Canadians here today, are spending more
Do,
time
eh?
paying attention. I'm Canadian.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay, I didn't know that. Well, there we go.
Looking at Canada than they're looking at California.
Sure.
And that's
easier
that's
from a capital markets perspective.
Well, yes, but it's also okay to look at their structure and all the things they're doing. The flip side is, I don't know if you've been, but you should go to see it. It is a super regulated experience for the consumer, almost unattractive in spots. The packaging looks like a pack of, looks like it's like cigarette regulation. And so I'm hopeful that there's a blend of some of the things they're doing well, some of the things California's doing well, and others can start to find their groove. What do you think? You're very close to the regulators. And as an industry, we appreciate all the work that you do in that direction. But
bridging the gap.
What do you think California is doing really well that the world actually, apart from, I know that the background and all of the secret sauce lives in the history of California, but from a regulatory standpoint, what is one of the things that is going well? Because there's just a lot of negative news.
No one's going to jail.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go with that one.
I mean, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
I think the ability for different license types and being able to come in and do this legally is a big step. I think we're also doing well in the branding, the packaging, and telling the story a bit better than others. I mean, you think about some brands that have coming from Colorado or Oregon or some of these other states. I feel like a lot of the brands are actually right now of the talk of the town in California. And I think it's because we have that scale. And we have the culture, and
they're able to come in here and scale here, because of the environment that's been created here.
And the regulators and the laws would create a platform to be able to do that. I mean, I think that's what's happening.
That's perhaps the innovation of California, but spitting out in a different way. Last question I want to ask you also, because I know you're an expert in this, and you properly corrected me earlier. We tend to refer to the black market. It's on everybody's lips these days. It doesn't matter where you go. If people are pre-regulation, they say we're going to do this to kill the black market. If it's post-regulation, it's like, oh my God, the black market's growing. It's the illicit market.
Illicit, yes.
Illicit,
unregulated market.
Where do you think? I mean, are we going to take chunks out of it in 3-month intervals, or is it going to be more like 12, 18-month intervals to feel like we're making progress in that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, I don't want to go back to Prohibition 2.0, where we just start throwing people in jail for illicit activity. Ideally, it's about a path to licensure or a path to bringing in as much of that cannabis as possible. I think that one of the biggest parts is taxes. I mean, if you think about it, we have a 4-tier tax structure in California. We have excise tax, we have cultivation tax, excise tax, local tax, state sales tax.
Yeah.
And then you have your discount on your medical, if you have your state card, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, state sales tax compounds all those other taxes, so it makes it even more expensive. To me, it's not about having a higher tax, it's about taxing more weed and having a lower tax rate.
Right.
And giving enough opportunity to all of these municipalities and all these operators to come in, because when my perspective is that eventually we will be a net exporter legally outside of California.
That would be
right.
Exciting.
I think that's it's gonna happen in our lifetime. I think it's gonna happen relatively soon before we know it. And when I think about the appetite for global California cannabis and the infrastructure that's needed to be able to supply that, man, we need everybody, all hands on deck, as many operators as possible.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to distinguish the various qualities, the various terroirs, the various selling points of all these different factions and groups that are bringing value from their own perspective.
Yeah.
I mean,
sounds like 12 months at a time. In terms of being able to look back and say, we're making progress.
Yeah, I mean, you also have to look at it like the illicit market, a lot of people are trying to get licenses, but there's others that aren't, but there are people, but you can't get your state license until you get your local license. Yeah. So it's a lot of just regulatory hurdles that you have to go through, and those take time.
Yeah.
So, 12 months from now, we may have a whole new batch of licenses that are coming out. And then the question is, how does that play within the existing demand of the product?
What inning do you think we're in?
Exhibition. Game hasn't even started yet.
Spring training.
Yeah. This is easily
All right.
spring training. I think it's about like who's on your team. What are you looking at? And, outside of the groups, you're playing pickup ball with everyone. Everyone's friendly. I mean, the scoreboard's not even active yet. Track and trace is not even active yet
All
in
right.
California.
Well, I would pick you.
Yeah.
It's good to have you here,
Absolutely.
David. We're here at the Cannabis Society's one-on-one, I should say, exec conference here just outside San Francisco at HellMD's headquarters. David Hua, thank you so much for being here
welcome.
for the
Thank
day,
you.
and thanks for chatting with us.
That was fun.
And
Thank
stay
you.
tuned for our next guest.
One.
And we're back here at HellMD headquarters in Larkspur, California, just outside San Francisco. We are hosting the Cannabis Society's one-on-one executive conference. And I have with me Tom from Zuber Lawler. Welcome. Thank you for spending the day with us here in the office, and thanks for joining us for a few minutes in studio. Tom, why don't we just start by telling us a little bit about what you do, your role in the global cannabis industry.
Sure. Thank you, Larry. I'm delighted to be here at Hello MD. I'm Tom Zuber. I'm the managing partner of Zuber Lawler. We have offices in Los Angeles, Silicon Valley, Chicago, New York. We represent many of the largest companies in the world, the technology companies, the restaurant chains, the pharmaceutical companies, and so forth. We do M&A, high-stakes litigation, IP work, and so on and so forth. What makes us unique as a law firm, Larry, is that we've been in cannabis for over 12 years. That is unique as far as the firms that do the work we do for the companies that we do it. There's nobody that's been here for even a few years, much less over 12. So this gives us a fantastic understanding of where cannabis is and where it's going, and it facilitates our growth of the value of cannabis businesses, not just in the United States, but across sovereign borders throughout the world. We represent many of the biggest brands in the industry at this point, and we're excited to be in this very exciting industry.
Well, we're excited to have you here. We have a really
Thanks.
nice mix of people, the folks like yourselves who see the whole world. We have some folks here who are really just California folks. We have some folks from Canada, and that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, you know, the industry's in this weird place where typically the world is watching the U.S., more specifically California. What do I do next? What are the trends? The world's not as much doing that when it comes to cannabis, just because they have to follow markets that are more mature from a regulatory standpoint, et cetera, like Canada.
Yeah.
And what happens is sometimes just people forget that as a country here, we're still not there. And so there's a lot of market ahead when we figure that out.
Yeah.
With your kind of purview of the world, how does, what is phase one of how the federal government in this country moves forward so that we can start as an industry to move forward federally?
Sure. So I think in some respects the federal government is moving forward in its own way. To be clear, prohibition is in some ways a gift, right? Many of us and many of the companies that we speak to today wouldn't be here at all if federal prohibition didn't exist. And that's a good thing.
You're correct.
Increases options and so on and so forth. On the other hand, the potential of the cannabis plant will not be fully realized in terms of the good that it can do for the population of the world until prohibition ends, and not just here in the United States, but everywhere. When we talk about federal legalization, that's a misnomer. It's unlikely that the federal government is going to legalize cannabis, so to speak. What's going to happen more precisely is that it's going to deschedule cannabis, meaning it's going to remove it from Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act. So what that will do is they'll say it's no longer considered like heroin to be something that the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, is going to be focused on. And so what that means is it's left to the states. So it will still require a state regulation, a municipal regulation underneath that. So really what's going to happen is it's going to play out something like the alcohol industry, right? Where each state treats alcohol differently. In some states you can import and export more freely than in regard to other states within the U.S. That's what's going to happen over these next few years. I'm going to make I think a dramatic prediction, but I'm pretty confident in it. So for what that's worth, Trump will likely deschedule cannabis, and the reason is, in my view, because Trump is going to make a very simple two-pronged analysis. He's going to ask himself, if I deschedule cannabis, am I going to lose my base? And he's going to say no, because he won't. And then the second prong of that analysis that he will make is, if I deschedule cannabis, will I gain voters that I wouldn't otherwise have gained?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is yes. And based on that, I think he will probably deschedule cannabis closer to the election.
I would argue he would more take one off the board of the other guys, potentially also gain voters as a result, maybe in the middle. But I agree with you wholeheartedly that that'll happen sometime in 2020.
Yeah.
And more and more people that I speak to are betting on that, in fact. The question is, will that be, that descheduling, So that has other implications around FDA, et cetera, I
Yeah.
believe, if I remember correctly. But will that descheduling be enough for pharma, alcohol, tobacco, private equity, big license holders on the media side, these big either capital sources or distribution sources or marketing sources, will that be enough for them to enter, those that are, for most part, in the U.S. still on the sidelines?
The answer to your question is
I mean,
yes.
assuming they're
but
interested in the
it's-
business,
yeah.
I'm just saying from vis-a-vis the reasons today, maybe they're not entering.
I'm going to give two answers. The short answer is yes. And furthermore, I'll submit to you that many of these companies aren't waiting on the sidelines, really. It just looks like they are. Many of the pharmaceutical companies, we represent two of the biggest in the world.
Yeah.
Many of the pharmaceutical companies have the largest patent portfolios in the world relating to cannabis. So they're already in.
Yeah.
They're waiting on the sidelines, and the day
Fair
prohibition ends, they're going to jump in that day.
That's what I mean. They are in. They're on the sidelines, though. In.
That's right.
Right.
They
right.
are. I think the
So is
longer
that
question.
But that's my
Yeah.
question: is what you're predicting around Trump's descheduling? Is that for them the end of prohibition? Is that enough?
So the short answer is yes, sort of, but the longer answer is it's more complicated than that, and I'll be specific. So as an example, when Trump, if he deschedules, which we both believe he will apparently, if he deschedules, when he deschedules, what happens there is you've dropped this egg onto the ground and people have to pick it up. So for instance, the Food and Drug Administration has to pick it up to some extent, right? So the Food and Drug Administration, if something is categorized on Schedule 1 along with heroin, which cannabis is, the Food and Drug Administration says, not my farm, not my cow, not my problem.
Now it is.
Now it is, right. So Trump is descheduled, now it is. Just about everything we're talking about is a food or a supplement, unless it's a topical cream or it's an essential oil or something like that, or it's a drug, which is also governed by the FDA, right? So that means that the FDA is going to take the reins of it. We've got some funky things that exist in relation to cannabis from the FDA's perspective that have never been seen before as a function of the way cannabis grew up, which is through an illegal market, a medicinal market, recreational by state, and then ultimately post-prohibition at the federal level. So as an example of that, typically the way the FDA, and this is getting the answer to your question, it's very interesting, challenging, and that's where the opportunity lies, I think, for investors. The FDA typically will say once something is considered a drug, it cannot be a food or a supplement, okay? Obviously, that doesn't really work for CBD.
Right.
So CBD, I think most of us have heard of Epidiolex, which is the drug that's been approved by the FDA, and that took 10 years and $1 billion+ or whatever it took, something in that ballpark. So that's not really on the table. And there's so much CBD product out there that the notion that every CBD product has to be considered a drug is not sustainable. So the FDA has already pretty much telegraphed that it's going to make an exception to that general rule.
Yeah.
And that means CBD has to be regulated. How much is it going to be regulated? Well, for instance, the pharmaceutical industry is going to have a say in that, and so are many other industries with deep pockets to influence through lobbying the take of the federal government, including the FDA component of it. So as an example, the lower that threshold is, the better it is for companies with big pockets, right? Because that means that it's a barrier to entry for other companies that would want to put CBD products on the marketplace. But to put a finer point on it, it's not, to me, conceivable that the FDA could allow products that say this CBD helps you sleep better without FDA approval, because at that point the FDA becomes irrelevant.
It sounds to me like...
So there's a lot of work to do after
to your
descheduling.
analogy about the egg, is that after, let's say, he does that, we're in for a bit of a free-for-all.
Yes.
At some level, because you get more gray area before you get black and white, I think is what, or at least interpreted gray area, until some of these other systemic things start to work themselves out. One of those things,
I think that's a great way to put it.
that I'm very curious about is, once that happens, do we end up with just a cannabis market and capitalism takes over and figures out whether there's really a medical market and a rec market and a this market? Today I find it actually increasingly confusing for the consumer. I don't think either of those are great terms, but they're out there. They're legacy. We're seeing more governments, as you say, nothing medical, rec, and then not really know what to do with their medical program But I think that is highly connected to what happens at a federal level, and that you have the whole medical profession that until things like that start to happen, they're out too, because 2 and 2 just don't add up for them to participate in something that is considered heroin. So do you think that that could be one of the outcomes, that we will still ultimately get to a place where there is a pharma market or a medical market versus a recreational market, or are we just going to have a big market and it's going to work itself out at the street level?
No, I think that you're right. There will be your implication is correct, that there will be a bifurcation between a recreational market and a medical market. There are so many different answers to that question in a great way, in a wonderful way, in an exciting way, so I'll focus on a few of them. First of all, there's been a focus, properly so, on recreational and how excited the recreational market is as compared to the medical market, right? Well, ultimately, what's going to happen, I think somewhat ironically, is that the shift, the excitement will move back to the medical market. The reason is
I agree
because
with that.
we will pay a lot more for a drug than we will for a joint.
Yeah.
When you find a drug that works, that's a big deal.
Whatever it takes.
And you'll pay more by an integer factor,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that means it's almost a function of math that the focus has to shift back to medicinal at some point. Okay, so furthermore, there's going to be some threshold beyond which things are considered a drug, and beneath that, things are going to be considered recreational. And where that's going to fall is going to vary by country, by sovereignty, right? Attitudes are very different. I just returned from Berlin and from London, from Germany and the United Kingdom,
Yeah.
more precisely, and in terms of my point. And so they have very different attitudes toward cannabis, toward CBD.
Yeah, I would say.
Very different.
But it's exciting to have the
Yeah.
rest of the world coming forward. They have a lot to figure out in those parts
Yeah.
of the world. I mean, that's what I was saying earlier to another guest. It's just, we forget that when we've got the whole USA
Yeah.
still to go, Latin America, most of Europe. I mean, what inning are we in?
Oh, we're in we're just approaching the second inning. I'd say there's
Okay.
the third batter is about to be taken down in at the end of the first inning.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much
Pleasure, Larry.
for joining us, Tom from Zuber Lawler. And we are here at the Cannabis Society 101 Executive Conference, hosted by Hello MD, just outside San Francisco. Please stay tuned for our next guest.
Thank you.
Well, that's what you thought.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. We're back here at HellMD's headquarters in Larkspur, California, just 10 miles from the beautiful Golden Gate Bridge. And we're at Cannabis Society's one-on-one exec conference, and it's an honor to have Bill Hennessey, who created and runs the Cannabis Society series of events around the world.
It's an honor to be in Hello MD's beautiful office. I must say, we often host these conferences in accounting firms and law firms, and very, very, very infrequently is the view as good as this, but I can tell you never before has we been as comfortable as we are today, thanks to Hello MD's hospitality.
It's a pleasure to be part of it. Bill, why don't we just start with the Cannabis Society, you specifically. Tell us a little bit about the Cannabis Society and your original vision and what you guys are out there doing, including today. And
as an entrepreneur, I've been in and out of the conference or event space since 2004. And going back to about 10 years ago, we were doing a lot of raising capital work for general emerging tech. And over the last 4 to 5 years, I've been fortunate enough to have a number of classmates from business school who built major Canadian cannabis companies, whether it be TerraSand, Tokyo Smoke, or the guys that are leading Canopy Rivers. All of them have been involved with
You're
the same
from
business
Toronto.
school that I went to in Toronto. And so having followed those guys, I couldn't help but think our general raising capital conference concept that we had for tech founders needed to be applied to the cannabis industry. I'm sure we'll get into it later, but the model has evolved significantly to support the nuances of the cannabis vertical.
And so now you are doing these conferences all over the world, just in California. How do you go about that?
The Cannabis Society is on track to host between 75 and 80 conferences from now, 12 months out. About 40% of the current programming is in US, probably going to creep up to 50% here in the next 12 months. About 15% is in Canada. About 20% is in Europe. We're investing heavily in Europe, and we can talk more about that. And the balance is international.
And you have like me a little bit, you get to travel and see not only the world, but the cannabis world specifically. And it's very dynamic. Every country, every state, every province, everybody has different regs. Everybody's at a different stage. Everyone has different levels of stigma. Everyone has different use or non-use of capital markets. I don't think there's an industry like that, actually, that's grown up in such a disaggregated way. Is there a country right now that is more exciting to you than any other one in the globe in terms of the way that they're going ahead, the ultimate end game for them?
Here's how the Cannabis Society looks at it from a capital markets perspective, and our business tends to be directly correlated to capital markets. From a capital markets perspective, we say Canada is done, although the rec legalization around...
Do you want to say that while we're live, though?
Around
Canada's done?
Canada is not done from a business standpoint.
Agreed.
Okay, but from a capital markets perspective, most of it is in the rearview mirror. That said, it's going to get really interesting here late Q3 with the vaping, the beverage and edibles.
In Canada.
In Canada. It's going to get really interesting.
Yeah.
Today, the U.S. market is the most robust market from the Cannabis Society's perspective in the world. Looking 5 or even 10 years down the road, we are investing most heavily in Germany, and we think it is the most exciting growth market.
Why is that?
There are already 30,000 medical patients in Germany, but there's still so much to figure out.
Well, how many people live in Germany? 85, 90 million, I think.
It's huge.
Yeah.
There is so much to be figured out, and both you being an entrepreneur and myself being an entrepreneur and all the other entrepreneurs in the world, that's what makes it most exciting.
What do you think the culture in Germany is around cannabis as it relates on a 1 to 10 stigma? If Canada is a 6.
If Canada's a 6, Germany is between 1 and 2.
Less.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And the fact that you're investing a lot in the U.S., that's kind of exciting in the sense that there's like 50 countries basically in the U.S., in that each one of them has their own ecosystems of brand, their own ecosystem of investors, et cetera.
California is the same size as Canada.
Yeah.
It's the same from a population standpoint. It's the
Yeah.
same size. Funny enough, I was at Canaccord's growth conference. I guess it was in May, in New York City, and the room was probably half Canadians
Yeah.
and half Americans. And I walked away from that conference never more optimistic about the worldwide cannabis industry, but saying from our business's perspective, we need to triple overnight or we're going to get left behind,
Right.
because this is an international business that is going to get dispersed at one point or another across the entire world.
Yeah. Well, with one of our previous guests, we were just talking about how California is always the beacon of innovation. It's always ahead of the world. People come here to find trends. When it comes to cannabis, I think that is starting again to be the case as the California regulated market starts to settle in a little bit. But still, if you want to come do business in California, you have to come into California to do business. You can't just participate from the sidelines. That being said, there is an enormous amount of innovation going on in California. The guest made the point to say that, we've been doing this longer than anybody, even just from a product development perspective. It's not exportable for the moment. When you, though, go home from a week in California, you can bring back knowledge, trends, insights, what you see. What do you tell people in Canada about California?
Yeah, interesting question. The Canadians who are in the room today, I said, hey, you got to get to Hello MD's office in San Francisco. The product innovation, especially with that super important Canadian date, October 17th, when beverage, edibles, and vaping will become legal. There's huge demand for the Canadian players to pick up product and product innovation here. What I personally tell Canadians when I go home from California is I say Los Angeles is the most significant cannabis market in North America.
And in size and innovation, in the experience, or do you say it in
All
the
of
sense
the
that that's
above?
where the world should go to? That's what the cannabis market should look like.
In a perfect world, the innovation, the creativity, and the marketing opportunities, which we don't have in
Correct,
Canada that
yeah.
are in LA,
Yeah.
the rest of the world can learn something from it.
Yeah.
And I only wish the Canadian market, from an innovation standpoint, a product standpoint, and a marketing standpoint, mirrored the Los Angeles market.
Yeah. Well, I think one day it will. I also think the Californians have something to learn from Canada, and so that's why events like today that bring Californians, Canadians, brands, investors, entrepreneurs, is a great opportunity for everybody. I want to thank you again for bringing your event to Hello MD here in Larkspur, California, and for spending a few moments with us today. I'm looking forward to spending the rest of the day with you, and please stay tuned for our next guest.
1.
Focus.
And we're back here in partly sunny Northern California, just outside San Francisco at HelloMD's headquarters in Larkspur. Today we have the honor of hosting the Cannabis Society one-on-one executive conference, which brings together entrepreneurs, investors, Canadian corporations, and including Melissa and Erin from Kiki Leaf. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks for spending a few moments with us here in studio. Why don't we start with one of you telling us about Kiki Leaf?
Sure. So Kiki Leaf is a CBD concierge platform that helps personalize and curate the CBD shopping experience for women. So we have built a product recommendation engine that takes first-party data from consumers who tell us all about their health and wellness habits, their sexual health habits, their beauty routines, and we use that information to pair it with the best CBD products that are on the market that are sold on our platform.
And how do they tell you that?
So they tell us through a personalized quiz that's sort of gamified. So they go on our platform, they take a quiz that's under 3 minutes, all about how they're sleeping, their levels of anxiety, what their skin is like, and from those questions, we ingest their data to recommend the most appropriate products for them.
And those products that are on the platform, are you making some of your own decisions in terms of what's an okay product to be made available then to that consumer? I mean, one of the things with CBD, of course, is we're in effect under-regulated. One day we will feel over-regulated.
Yeah.
So this is an opportunity, I think, to do things innovatively. However, there is this lots of, let's say less than ideal product coming to market. So how do you decide arbitrarily or otherwise what to make available?
That's part of the reason why we built the technology, is to help simplify that process, because you can find CBD anywhere. It's Bodega in New York, and it's hard to figure out what brands work, what brands are good for pain, what's good for sleep. There's little to no brand equity in the space, so there's a big opportunity for brands to really connect to consumers in a meaningful way. We have a curation advisory board of cannabis leaders, scientists, behaviorists, therapists, health and wellness experts that kind of help us with brand discovery and product discovery to help figure out what products are really quality. And we also
And they have to prove it. So they have to provide us all the reporting, so no pesticides, no solvents.
Okay.
And so they have to go through a rigorous process just to sort of be qualified to see if it is a fit for our platform.
So how many how many products are...
Right now we have 27 products on the
Okay,
platform,
so
over
you're-
15
you're-
brands. We've turned away a lot of brands just because they haven't been able to meet our high standards.
And you should know this then, or starting to know this, not why are people using CBD, because I think people are using CBD for every reason that they can imagine. For what conditions or otherwise are people succeeding with CBD?
I think women specifically are turning to CBD as an alternate for things like drinking wine and Xanax and prescription products. It helps with our self-care, whether that's menstrual cramps or high anxiety. A lot of moms are using it to deal with their kids. It's great in terms of care for your skin, anti-inflammatory. As you get older, your skin gets more red and puffy, and so we love the beauty.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
Aging is lovely.
Exactly.
And so
it's
you're
helping.
here to say that you are seeing people succeed.
Absolutely. Yep. We've had a lot of testimonials from brands telling us that they're seeing great success. We've tested every brand on our platform. Our curation board has tested a lot of our products. We have kind of a non-scientific test group of friends that have tested everything, and we won't recommend something that we haven't ourselves tested.
And CBD is finding itself into, I would argue, too many vehicles, but it's in everything, including Carl's Jr. or somebody to that extent. Where do you think it should actually stop? I mean, should it just be topicals and tinctures? Should it be in just everything? Or should it be in something that feels more like a holistic or wellness vehicle to consume for those purposes?
I don't know about your opinion on this, but I think...
You can both
yeah.
share yours.
I don't think, I have yet to see the value of CBD in food.
Okay.
So when it comes to self-care and beauty routines, I've seen a lot of benefits, but I have yet to kind of figure out what the benefit is of having a little bit of CBD in my protein bar or in my granola.
Other
and so,
than it might sell more bars.
Right, right.
So what do you think it should be in principally to help the market understand that this is really a wellness product?
Products that align with solving problems like stress, anxiety.
But in terms
pain,
of delivery vehicles, like
Topicals.
tinctures, topicals, capsules, that type of thing,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
we're more used to
Yeah.
understanding as to help us
Consumer.
with our health.
Yeah, and I think that also CBD is now going into makeup, which doesn't necessarily make sense. I think everyone, again, is
Right.
trying to put CBD into everything again,
Right.
but I do think that kind of like sticking in one lane in the beginning, at least for wellness, is probably most beneficial. We want to take down any barrier to entry to enter the CBD market for women. So we're trying to make it really easy for them to connect to the right brands for them. And so I think when you put it in foreign things like a burger,
Yeah, it's
it just doesn't make sense.
Well, I actually think it's just dilutive to the message of CBD
Yeah.
to see it on a billboard for a burger. It just,
Right.
It doesn't tell me that it's a wellness product.
Yeah.
But,
wellness
I mean,
plus
I-
burgers don't.
but I
really
mean,
go together.
we may not see that sometimes, but we may not see that in other countries, though. Like we're seeing that in the U.S. Are you folks just in the U.S. for the
We are,
moment? And
yes.
and are you interested in international markets, or you're
Not
going to
yet,
stay
one thing
focused
at a
in these?
time.
Yeah.
So we're here.
Yeah.
But I think also the different markets in the U.S. are so different. Like in L.A., people are somewhat used to taking tinctures and experimenting with products that come in a tube like that.
Yeah.
In New York, we don't really see that. A
Right.
lot of it is topicals and serums for your face, and it's something that's pretty natural. And I think, we're learning more about what the rest of the country is going to do.
I'm guessing
but
both consumers and brands alike are pretty happy that you're doing this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's one of those interesting markets where both sides of the equation need a middle person.
Right.
Yeah.
We're
Or
not
middle
just coming out with
platform.
another product line, another
Yeah.
cream, and we're also really focused on accessibility and inclusivity. So everything on our platform is under $100. We don't think that you should have to buy, something for $200 that's going to help with your joint pain.
Yeah. Last question.
Yeah.
Why is it called Kiki Leaf? Maybe it's going to turn out that I should know that answer. But
No. So we've been best friends for 12 years. And when we created the company, we really wanted to find something that was personal to us, that resonated. So we were going through some 80s movies. One of our favorite movies was Teen Witch. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have missed that.
Okay. Well, everyone should watch this.
Okay.
It's based on a teenager who becomes a witch during high school, and everything she says literally comes true. So she has a friend named Kiki who goes in the play, and so as she's about to go on the stage, she tells her to break a leg. And so we've been saying "break a leg, Kiki" to each other for years.
long
And somehow, when we just came up with that word, it resonated. Drake came out with a song a few months later. It resonates with everyone.
Yeah. RBG's nickname in college was Kiki, which is really cool, which could be
nice.
a better story, but Kiki
All right.
for us
Yeah.
is Teen Witch.
That's
Yeah.
good. It's
Yeah.
personal.
Yes,
That's all
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Well, we're really happy that you're here with us for
Thanks
the
for
day
having us.
here at Hello MD for the event. Erin, pleasure to chat with
Thanks,
you.
Sarah.
So nice to meet
Melissa,
you.
And the ladies of Kiki Leaf, thank you for joining us. And please stay tuned for our next guest. And we're back here in Larkspur, California, just outside San Francisco at HellMD headquarters. We've had the pleasure today of hosting the Cannabis Society one-on-one executive event, which brings Canadian licensed producers, leaders in the cannabis market up north, Canadian brands, investors together for a day of conversation. And we've had the pleasure of hosting several of those folks here with us today. I want to thank you for spending time with us and listening in. I also want to let you know that next week is, as it is July 4th, it's also Canada Day, which is July 1st. A piece of trivia for you. We're going to take a break from live streaming, but the week of the July 8th, we'll be back here in the HellMD studios, bringing to you live our Ask a Doctor series, talking specifically about chronic pain, and we do hope you will join us. Thanks again.